Hey guys, this video is just to quickly review simple and compound interest problems before you try them out on your own. So first, let's review what simple interest is. Remember, simple interest is where it's only calculated one time based on how much money you started with. So they're going to figure out what percent that originally is, and that amount is what you're going to get added on every single year. So it doesn't change. The formula for that, remember, is I equals P times R times T. So let's just quickly review what each of those letters stands for. Remember, the big capital I stands for interest. The P stands for principal. And remember, that is how much money you start with, how much money you originally take into the bank. R stands for the rate that you're getting, and we use that in its decimal form, not the percent form. And then T stands for time. And remember, we always want time in years. So let's actually look into doing an example of simple interest. So this problem says you deposit $800 into a savings account that earns 2.5% simple interest. How much will you get from that interest after 10 years? So it's always good to start off by filling in the parts that you were given. So we see you deposit $800 into the account. That right there is your principal amount, that $800. And you earn 2.5% interest. So that's our rate, but we need the decimal form of that. So we're going to move the decimal place over 2 times to the left, and that would give us the decimal of 0.025. And then time is 10 years. Once we have all those, we're ready to actually plug it into our formula to calculate what the interest is going to be. So our formula, I equals P R T, we have 800 times 0.025 times 10. Plug that into your calculator and see how much you get. And this time it actually comes out to an even $200. So just keep in mind, with simple interest, the formula gives you only the amount that you get added onto that in interest. So if we actually wanted the total balance of our account, we would have to add the principal to that $200. But if it's only asking you for interest, you're good once you get that formula. So now let's review compound interest, because that's where it gets a little bit different. Instead of only calculating the amount that you get added on one time, compound interest changes every year or every twice a year, whatever that given set amount of time is. So let's say you started with $400 and they calculate your percentage of that in the first year. In compound interest, after they add on your interest, they recalculate how much you're going to get the next time. So it's kind of like your interest is earning interest. That formula looks a lot different. It starts off as B equals P, in parentheses 1 plus R, all to the n power. So a really different looking formula. The capital B stands for balance, meaning in this formula, it doesn't just give you the amount you get in interest, it gives you your full balance right away. The good news is P still stands for principal, and the R still stands for rate, and we still use the decimal form. If you notice, there's no T in this formula. Time is gone. We no longer think of just time, but instead N stands for the number of times it's calculated or compounded. So I'm going to write compounded. But what you should think of is how many times do they calculate what interest you are getting. So now let's do some examples using this formula for compound interest. This problem says you deposit $750 into a savings account, and this time it earns 11% compound interest annually. How much will your balance be after 5 years? Just like with the simple interest problem, it's good to start off by filling in what you were given. So I see that $750, that is my principal. 11% rate. So if we move the decimal over 2 times, that's 0.11. Notice there's no 0.011 because if we move it over twice, there's no need for a 0 in front of that decimal. And then how much will your balance be after 5 years? Well, it says annually and 5 years. So if they only compound it once a year for 5 years, that's a total of 5 times. And then we want to know what is my balance. So if I start with my formula, P1 plus R to the N, that looks like for me 750 times 1 plus 0.11 all to the 5th power. Remember, when you are doing it in your calculator, I would recommend doing this part first. So do 1 plus 0.11, get that answer, take it to the 5th power, and press enter. Once you have that number, then multiply it by 750. Once you do all that in your calculator, you should get the final answer of $1,263 and a very long decimal, but since we're using money, we want to cut it off at 2 decimal places, so it would be in 79 cents. The tricky part about compound interest is you have to change what you do if it compounds more than once a year. So we kind of see these keywords here, semi-annually, quarterly, and then every so many months. Remember, semi-annually means 2 times a year. Quarterly means 4 times a year. And every blank months is different depending on how many months they do it for. When you have these types of problems where it gets compounded more than once a year, you have to change 2 things. You have to change what you use as your rate, and you have to change the N more than just your number of years. Remember, with rate, you want to take the rate that you get and divide it by the number of times a year. So if it was semi-annually, I would take my rate and divide it by 2, since semi-annually means twice a year. With my N, I'm not going to divide it anymore. I'm going to do my number of years, this time times the number of times a year. So let's say I had a savings account for 4 years, and it compound interest 4 times a year. 4 years, 4 times each year, that would be 16 total times, and that 16 is what I would want to use as my N. So we're going to look at an example using this type of problem next before you go out and try them on your own. So this last example says you deposit $1,000 into a savings account that earns 1% compound interest quarterly. How much will your balance be after 4 years? So as always, let's start by filling out what we were given. My principal is that $1,000. My rate is 0.01%, but I get it quarterly. That is 4 times a year. So with rate, I need to divide that by 4. And then my N is going to come from 4 years, but 4 times a year. So the N that I'm actually going to use is 16. My rate, if I do that really quickly, 0.01 divided by 4 gives me 0.0025, which is what I'm going to use in my formula. So if I fill it all out, B equals P, 1 plus R to the N. I'm going to be doing 1,000 times 1 plus 0.0025 all to the 16th power. Remember in your calculator to do this part first and then multiply it in the end by 1,000. And this one actually only ends up getting you $1,040.76 in the end. So not that much from interest, probably because it's just 1%, and that's not very much. So hopefully this kind of review was good and you remember how to do these. You're going to try them out on your own. One side of simple and compound, and the other side of your practice is going to be these types of problems where it's compounded more than once a year. So good luck.